This is TBK's Truth Frame, revealing the echoes of history across our world. Truth Frame, the Nayaks, the last kings of Ceylon. For more than 2,000 years, the island of Lanka crowned kings. Sinhala kings. Warrior kings. Sacred kings. But in its final chapter, the throne passed to outsiders. Princes from across the sea. South Indian sons of the Madurai Nayak dynasty. And they would become the last guardians of a dying kingdom. This is the story of how foreign princes became the final kings of Ceylon, and how betrayal, ambition, and empire brought an ancient monarchy to its knees. The Invitation. By the early 1700s, the Kandyan kingdom was fractured. Nobles fought for power. Royal bloodlines thinned. The throne stood vulnerable. The chiefs of Kandy faced a choice: allow chaos to consume the kingdom, or bring in a ruler who owed everything to them. So they looked across the Pak Strait, to Madurai. To the Nayaks. A dynasty known for its discipline, its devotion, and its diplomacy. The Nayaks were Hindu kings who respected Buddhism. They had no local loyalties in Kandy. No rival clans. No political baggage. To the Kandyan chiefs, they were the perfect solution. And so, in 1739, a South Indian prince crossed the waters, and history changed forever. Sri Vijaya Rajasinya, the first Nayak king of Kandy. He arrived not as a conqueror, but as a chosen ruler. Married into the Kandyan royal family. Accepted by the Buddhist clergy. Welcomed by the chiefs. Under his reign, the kingdom stabilized. Temples were restored. Rituals revived. And the Nayak dynasty took root in the heart of the highlands. But the true golden age of the Nayaks was yet to come. Cutie Sri Rajasinya, the protector of Buddhism. In 1747, the throne passed to his brother, Sri Cutie Sri Rajasinha. A king remembered not for war, but for spiritual revival. At a time when the Buddhist Sangha was fading, he reached out to Siam, modern Thailand, and restored the higher ordination. He rebuilt temples. Rekindled rituals. And breathed life back into the island's ancient faith. To this day, the Buddhist lineage in Sri Lanka traces its revival to this South Indian king. But even as the kingdom flourished spiritually, foreign powers circled like vultures. Rajati Rajasinya, the poet king. After Cutie Sri came Sri Rajati Rajasinha, a scholar king. A poet. A lover of the arts. His reign was peaceful, but the world around him was changing. The Dutch tightened their grip on the coasts. The British watched from afar, waiting for their moment. The storm was gathering. And the last king was about to take the throne. Sri Vikrama Rajasinya, the last king. Kanasami Naika. This was the name he carried as a young prince of the Madurai Nayak lineage before being adopted into the Kandyan royal family and crowned as the last king of Sri Lanka. A bit of context. He was born in South India in 1780. His family belonged to the Telugu-speaking Nayak dynasty. After the death of Sri Rajati Rajasinha, the Kandyan chief selected Kanasami as the successor. Upon coronation, he received the royal name Sri Vikrama Rajasinha, meaning the auspicious, heroic Lion King. Thus, in 1798, an 18-year-old prince ascended the throne. Sri Vikrama Rajasinha, the final monarch of Sri Lanka. He was young, determined, proud, and surrounded by enemies, not just the British, but his own chiefs. He beautified the capital, built the Kiri Muhuda, the Lake of Milk, strengthened the palace, and tried to centralize power. But the Kandyan chiefs resented him. They whispered. They plotted. And when the British came offering promises of autonomy, protection, and privilege, the chiefs opened the gates. The failed British attempts to capture Kandy, before 1815. For more than 2 centuries, European powers controlled Sri Lanka's coasts, but none could conquer the Kandyan highlands. The British tried multiple times, and their most dramatic failure came in 1803, during the First Kandyan War. The First Kandyan War, 1803, the British disaster. According to historical accounts, the British launched a major expedition into the Kandyan kingdom in 1803, hoping to do what the Portuguese and Dutch had failed to do. Their goal: capture Kandy, force the kingdom under British control, end centuries of Highland independence. They succeeded, briefly. The British Army marched into the capital and occupied Kandy, which had been abandoned by the Kandyan forces. But this victory was an illusion. The Kandyan counterattack. Once the British were deep in the mountains, far from supply lines, the Kandyan forces struck back with guerrilla warfare, jungle ambushes, cutting off food and communication. Using terrain the British did not understand. The result was catastrophic. The massacre at Kandy, 1803. A British garrison left in Kandy was completely wiped out by Kandyan forces, as documented in military histories. Only a handful survived. The British retreated in humiliation. This defeat delayed British conquest for 12 more years. Why the British failed before 1815? The sources highlight several reasons. Terrain advantage. Kandy's mountains and jungles were nearly impossible for European armies to navigate. Logistics nightmare. British supply lines stretched from the coast into the interior, easy targets for Kandyan raids. Kandyan guerrilla tactics. The Kandyan army avoided open battle and used hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and scorched earth strategies. Internal unity, at that time. Unlike in 1815, the Kandyan chiefs had not yet turned against their king. The turning point. By 1815, the situation had changed. The chiefs betrayed Sri Vikrama Rajasinha. The British exploited internal divisions. Kandy fell without a fight. But before that, the kingdom had proven itself one of the most resilient in Asia, repelling every European invasion for 250 years. The fall of Kandy. In 1815, the British marched into Kandy without firing a single shot. The chiefs signed the Kandyan Convention, a document that dethroned their own king and handed sovereignty to the British crown. The last king in captivity, his days in Colombo, 1815. When Sri Vikrama Rajasinha was captured on February 18, 1815 at Medamahanura, he was not taken directly to India. He was first transported under heavy guard to Colombo, the British administrative capital. This journey itself was symbolic, the last king of the highlands being marched down to the coastal city long controlled by Europeans. Arrival in Colombo. Sri Vikrama Rajasinha, his queen Venkataran Gamal, their children, and close relatives were brought to Colombo in early March 1815, where he was kept. He was confined in a building near the Colombo fort, under strict surveillance. British officers recorded that crowds gathered to see the dethroned monarch, some out of curiosity, others out of sorrow. Conditions of captivity. He was treated as a state prisoner, not a criminal. He was allowed his royal attire and personal servants. His family remained with him. But he was constantly watched, and his movements were restricted. The British wanted to avoid any chance of rebellion in the Kandyan highlands, so they kept him isolated and powerless. The British debate his fate. During his weeks in Colombo, the British administration argued over what to do with him. 3 options were discussed. Keep him imprisoned in Colombo. Send him to Madras. Exile him deeper into India, far from Ceylonese influence. Governor Robert Brownrigg insisted that the king must be removed from the island entirely. His presence, even in chains, was a symbol that could ignite rebellion. The final decision: exile. By late March 1815, the British decided Sri Vikrama Rajasinha would be exiled permanently to India. The official justification was that his presence in Ceylon posed a danger to public tranquility. But the deeper reason was political. As long as the king remained on the island, the Kandyan people could rally around him. And the British feared a restoration movement. Departure from Colombo. On April 24, 1815, the king and his family were escorted to the Colombo harbor. Eyewitness accounts describe the scene. The king walked slowly, dignified despite captivity. His queen and children followed behind him. British soldiers lined the path. Curious crowds watched in silence. He was placed aboard the ship HMS Cornwallis, which set sail for Madras. This moment marked the final physical separation between the last king and the island he once ruled. Symbolic meaning. His brief captivity in Colombo represents the end of the Kandyan monarchy, the transfer of sovereignty to the British crown, the beginning of colonial rule over the entire island, the tragic exile of a king who never returned to his homeland. From Colombo, he would spend the rest of his life in Vellore Fort, dying in 1832, a king without a kingdom, a monarch without a country. There, far from the mountains of Kandy, the last king of Sri Lanka died in 1832. The legacy. The Nayaks were outsiders, yet they protected Buddhism, preserved Kandyan culture, and ruled with dignity in a kingdom surrounded by empires. Their story is not one of foreign domination, but of cultural fusion, of loyalty, of a dynasty that became part of the island's soul. And their fall was not the triumph of the British, but the tragedy of betrayal from within. The Nayaks were the last kings of Ceylon. And their story reminds us that a kingdom does not fall when enemies attack, but when its own guardians forget what they were meant to protect. thank you for stepping into this frame of truth. If this story moved you, share it forward and help restore the voices time tried to erase. Until the next episode, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep the memory alive.